Ampire. Babies. Hi, everyone. Hey there. Dispatches from Ashburn. Day 2 of training camp is in the books as the team went through their second short-ish practice, about an hour and a half today, where we got to see a little bit more of the red zone like we did in the first practice, a little bit more of some 2-minute drill type offense, as Dan Quinn, who said in his pre-practice press conference today that they want to focus here early on situational football, that they want to be able to kind of hit the ground running with some of the premier clutch moments in any game where they want to try to get that all together. And so that's where they started today. You probably know by now, if you're listening to this and watched all the tweets from out here in Ashburn during the day, that Marcus Mariota did again take the reps with the ones. I don't put a tremendous amount of stock into that, but Jaden Daniels is taking the second team reps. So Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and the starting offensive line, which has remained the same so far, Lucas Allegretti, Beatish Cosme, and Andrew Wiley, they're all out there. There was a moment today where I did get to see Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler together on the field, so that was an interesting first glimpse to get a look at. But overall, right now they are going to make Jaden Daniels earn the spot. And I don't take issue with anything like that. This is how they've set it up. They've never said that he had earned it yet. They described it as he'll know he's ready and we'll know he's ready. And I don't think it's a message to everybody. I just think that they're going through this process. And we're still 2 weeks away from a joint practice with the Jets before we get into the first preseason game. And a lot obviously is going to change. I haven't changed my opinion at this point that I believe he's going to be the starter, Jaden Daniels, on day one until otherwise, proven by what's happened on the field and what the team is saying and what he is saying. Daniels is going to speak to the media for the first time since training camp began tomorrow. So that'll be very interesting to hear what he has to say and see where he is kind of seeing himself throughout this process. In the meantime, I did get a chance to catch up with Jahan Dotson after practice today amid a media scrum, but you'll hear I got a number of questions in about where he is in his development, where he was mentally after last season, where he had a very down second year. He's hoping for a rebirth and to be reborn in this offense, and he's a clear number 2 in this offense. So the opportunity is going to be here for him to kind of change the narrative about where he was a year ago and get back to the place and project out to the type of talent that he believes, and I think we all believe that he is. So here was Jahan Dotson.
And I've been that, it's just a matter of getting the opportunity to do so. I was able to showcase those things in college. If my number is called upon at any time, I want to make a play for this team, and I'm capable of doing so.
You talk about adversity and, you weren't yourself. How do you reset, like in your mind? Where does it start? How do you start the reset when you know it wasn't your best?
You gotta lean on God, honestly. You gotta realize that he's blessed me to be able to play this game that I love and be able to do what I do at the highest level. I'm really out here just living my dream. So when you kind of sit back and you talk to God and you realize the blessings that he's blessed you with, you kind of get a deeper meaning for everything. I've been doing that recently, and I've been just being really thankful for everything, honestly. Just being out here today, being able to do what I love, and just have fun doing it. So make sure I don't take for granted any moment that I'm out here, and make sure I get the best out of everything that I do.
John, we haven't seen a lot of the scheme yet. I think by design they haven't really showed us much. But from your perspective, how does it fit you so far? How are you feeling in this offense?
Yeah, it's a lot of space. We're creating a lot of space on the field, on the offensive end. Really spreading us out horizontally and then stretching the field vertically. And that plays into my favor because I'm very, very capable of making things happen in open space. And it feels like you have a lot of space on the field with our new scheme. So, I feel like it's fitting my skill set pretty well, and it's just a matter of gelling into it.
The idea of, you becoming a route runner again, yeah. I know that was kind of, taken away from you would be the way to put it last year, but do you feel like they're letting you be yourself again in this offense?
Yeah, for sure. We've got some things early on put in But it's just a matter of right now just learning the offense, getting it down pat where it comes second nature. And I feel like when it comes to game plan specific stuff, obviously I'm gonna hopefully have some routes that I'm able to run and showcase my versatility both inside and outside. So I'm excited for it.
Did you watch a lot of what Cliff did in Arizona? And if you did, do you see the carryover of the effectiveness they had with that offense for those years as they bring it here?
Yeah, for sure. I watched a little bit of Christian Kirk because I know he played the slot when he was in Cliff's offense. Hollywood Brown was a good guy that just stretched the field. I've seen some film on those guys, and I kind of been studying that a little bit. But at the end of the day, I have my own skill set, and I think Cliff does a very good job of playing to our skill sets, making sure that we're in the best situations possible, where we can win, where we can showcase our skills. So I think that's a very good thing that he does.
Last thing, how are you thinking about building a relationship with Jaden this early together?
Just every rep. Every rep is crucial. Making sure that you get every rep, making sure that it's like a game rep. Because it's hard to simulate Sundays in practice, but you got to do the best you can. Making sure that I go hard every time he's back there. Not only him, but creating that rapport with Marcus as well, because you don't know what can happen. Making sure that I do my part and making sure that I'm in the right spots.
All right, so that was Jahan Dotson after practice today. Tomorrow you're going to hear from Dante Fowler, who I got a chance to catch up with. Former Cowboy turns Commander, talked about why he wanted to follow Dan Quinn and Joe Witt here to Washington and what it's like putting on this uniform after wearing the star on his helmet for the last couple of years. All right, let's go back to what happened in practice today. I thought something that was noticeable was that when this team did go to a 3 linebacker set for the first time that we got to see, and I think, we're going to see a lot of 2 linebacker sets because that's the modern NFL, 5 DBs, 2 linebackers. But when they did go to a 3 linebacker set, Jordan McGee, the rookie out of Temple, the 5th round pick, was the player that was out there in that position. So they continue to work Jamin Davis mainly as a special teamer / potential edge rusher. And I think the hope is that he is going to become an edge rusher. So when it comes to Davis, his clear path to making the team, and you're going to hear from Logan Paulsen in a minute where he plainly says it's possible that he's not going to make this 53-man roster, is he's going to have to develop and have a role on special teams and definitively show that there's a place for him where he can have some serious impact as a edge rusher, whatever that means, hand to the ground, not hand to the ground. Davis was a topic that Dan Quinn did discuss. He was very effusive about him. I think everybody knows what kind of athlete he is. I think everybody knows what his abilities are, but it just hasn't clicked at the linebacker positions, and this is a fresh start, but it's an interesting fresh start, and the clock is suddenly ticking on him. He's going to have to be able to show his value in a role. And if he doesn't, he could be, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but he could be the first real prominent change that this team kind of thinks about as they head into into this season. We'll see if he makes the 53. Certainly a player we're going to watch really closely here. All right, so that's what happened today. Visit some of the things that Terry McLaurin talked about yesterday in his first press conference in the opening day after practice, because he kind of revealed what is happening inside the building. And he wasn't asked directly about this pledge that was written by the players. Dan Quinn, in his press conference before practice yesterday, talked a lot about how, and he talked about this in the opening press conference in camp the day before, that the true mark of whether this team is going to end up becoming what they hope and envision it's going to be, and what the vision is that they have championship standards and they get there over a period of time, an undetermined period of time, but whatever period of time that is that the leadership's going to come from within. And they talked about, he said, and I'm planning on remembering this and asking him about this when we get to the end of training camp, to remind him to say, talk to me about the leaders in the locker room, because you asked that you wanted to be asked about who are the leaders. And he said, I hope that your hand cramps writing down all the names. This has started with what was described as a lot of team building activities outside of the facility. It is manifested into the team staying together for the first time in a few years off of campus together. Granted, they didn't travel anywhere, but they're staying local, but they're staying and it's at Lansdowne Resort, but they're staying at a resort. But they're staying together and they're staying away from their families for the few weeks. So they're trying to, build up team building while they do, maintain practices at the headquarters. And then he's asking for leadership to emerge. And Terry McLaurin was just kind of asked a question about the newness of everything and what's coming here. And he talked about how the team is starting to come together on its own, and they're doing so by writing a pledge. And here's what he was saying.
AP and DQ didn't really come in with really focus on what happened last year or the old regime. It was just, how do we move forward? How do we build an identity for this Commanders team? And they really allowed us to take the keys to the car and set standards for ourselves. Like, sure, there's expectations that they expect as a player and as a person, but whether it was through the team building activities that we had or just, writing a pledge as a team and letting the leaders run that. Like, it was literally our words, our sentiments, our accountability, and it's up to us to hold up to that standard. I think it's great that we have a group of guys with a lot of experience like that, and we know that it's going to pay dividends if we continue to hold ourselves accountable in that way. So it's been cool to, have a breath fresher air with, it just feels like a new start for everybody.
What was the pledge you guys wrote?
I'll probably try to keep most of it within our team, but it was essentially along the lines of just what we're going to commit each and every day when we come out to this football field. Not only what we're going to do on the field, but off the field. How we're going to prepare our bodies, how we're going to prepare our minds, how we're going to hold each other accountable when those things may slip. And I think one of the things that stands out the most is just, like I kind of touched on, is you can't take that personally. I think we're all competing for jobs, we're competing for respect, we're competing for some guys' contracts. So everybody has an individual aspect to it, but when you bring the team, you put the team first and you put it in writing, it forces you to be accountable, honestly, because it's like, well, I agreed to that. I may have signed that, or I was part of putting those words together. So if I'm not out there upholding, whether it's finishing, whether it's taking care of my body, being accountable, like, how can I expect our rookies to? And so I think that puts a good amount of accountability and pressure on our leaders, but also it forces the young guys and the guys who may, be here for a year, whatever. It's just, there's one voice and one sound that the team came up with outside of the expectation of the coaches or the organization, which I think is extremely powerful. I haven't really experienced anything necessarily like that, where the guys have come up with something like that, and it was just really cool to see everybody's ideas and how they view leadership, how they view team building, and what's important to having success. And obviously we know that doesn't mean anything if we don't live up to those standards, which that's part of the pledge, but also the wins and losses are a big part of that as well. And I think that's obviously the big picture, the wins and the losses. That's why we're all here, to win, but there's things underneath winning and losing that contribute to winning and losing, if that makes sense. And I feel like there's a very, very clear set of standards that we've put forward.
This has been the message really from the spring. This team has not pushed itself out there. They're not pushing a rebrand and jumping in on the excitement of what's being built here. They're playing it cool. They're playing it close to the vest, on and off the field. On it, they are hyper aware of not letting any cats out of the bag yet. They don't want anybody knowing what they're doing. They have not really shown, in my opinion, through the spring, at least publicly, any personnel pairings, any really schematic views. It should be an advantage for them. Obviously, they're going to have to give up the goods, at some point, because they have to practice. How much of that we're going to see when the things close down is going to be interesting to find out over the next few weeks. And how much we're going to see in practice, I can tell you off of just day one that we saw very little that would be anything that I think another team would glean from and have a sense of what they're going to be or what they're going to look like. So I think they're trying to use that to their advantage. But the other side of it is what McLaurin was talking about and what Dan Quinn's been talking about and what Adam Peters has been talking about and really what the Josh Harris group has been talking about in the ownership group, where they want to build something that is sustainable. They want to build something that has championship aspirations, but is going to be a group that you're going to be proud of. And as Dan Quinn put it, when you watch us, you're going to see us bring it. You're going to see the type of energy that this team is going to make you proud. It is going to be a team that is going to be exciting to watch. And the wins and losses may come. And to McLaurin's point where he said wins and losses, he didn't say aren't everything, they are, but underneath it, there are a lot of things that need to happen to bring wins and losses. They're trying to build a program here. They're trying to build it essentially from scratch. They have a new coaching staff. They have a new front office. They have a new ownership group. They have carryover players like McLaurin, Allen, Payne, but the vast majority of the team is going to be very different, and they're trying to set new standards. And they've brought in other people from other places who have been in leadership positions in the past. Bobby Wagner is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Marcus Mariota is a former Heisman Trophy winner, has been around the block and seems to understand exactly what his role is here. Austin Eckler was brought in. I talked to Logan Paulsen. You're going to hear from him in a few minutes. And he kind of reiterated a number of these points. Look at the people that they signed and brought in, that they've brought in here to try to quote unquote change the culture. And I know we've heard that 8 million times from 8 million different people, but watch how they're doing it, how they're going about it, how they're keeping everything inside, how they're letting everyone else just chit chat and talk, how they're not going out of their way to push Jaden Daniels and say he's going to be the savior, or try to push some kind of narrative on you, or try to push that this ownership group, if the skies are clear and the ownership group's going to fix everything for you overnight, or that Dan Quinn is going to bring a type of energy that the previous coaching staff was not exemplifying, and therefore you should buy in, and this is going to be completely different. They are really calculating how they're going to go about this. It seems like they've put their heads down. They're answering the questions. They're telling you what they want to be. They're trying to manifest it into reality, but they're not trying to fool you into believing anything. And if you listen closely, when you hear about expectations and what you expect, you don't hear them making any grandiose projections. You don't hear them saying, we're going to be Houston, or we're better than people think we are. Adam Peters pointed out, unsolicited, like, we're looking at 2 to 3 years down the road. We want to win right now. We're trying to make our roster better, but we have people in place and processes in place to get to 2 to 3 years down the road, the way San Francisco did, the way Detroit is now. They started with this vision with their front office and Dan Campbell, and they have manifested themselves into this position where they are very good, very competitive, and look like they're going to be for a period of time. San Francisco has become a standard bearer in the NFC. 2 of the prominent front office people are out of those particular front offices. The fact that there's a link back to New England where they've hidden what they've done in the past, with Adam Peters having worked under Bill Belichick, I think all of this is adding up to, I don't know what to expect, but I do believe them when I hear them talking about what they're trying to build, how they're trying to build it, and how they're trying to go about it in the right way. And this year, they're going to find out amongst this group of people who is on board with what they're doing, who is not. I'll reiterate, they did not give a lot of large contracts, give a lot of players with a lot of term attached to it. So they are not really married to many of the players that are out on this roster. But what they are married to is what they see as their vision and their projection for what the future looks like down the road, however far that road actually is. It's really interesting to watch, and it's a really different feeling. And it's a mix of excitement for not knowing what's about to happen, how good Jaden Daniels and the rest of the team could be, what a surprise they might be to other teams early in the season because it's so unknown what they're going to look like on the field, and they're trying to use that to their advantage. And at the same time, they're trying to say, we know we're not there yet. We're not trying to tell you we are, but we're laying down a foundation to get there. And we hope that you're willing to buy in, give patience, and trust us when September rolls around. You're going to like the way we play. All right, Logan Paulsen's going to join me next. Bram Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, here with Logan Paulsen. I don't like to make things about us, but let me make this about us just for a minute because you're joining the broadcast this fall. I'm really excited. I've really enjoyed working with you in the capacities we've had. I've enjoyed the conversations we've had about the team. I love your expertise. I think you're one of the best at analyzing the team. And so I'm really pumped to have you on the broadcast this fall with me.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. And I'm also pumped to be on there with you guys. You guys do such a good job with, your professionalism, your analysis, and it's an iconic thing to be part of this broadcast group. So it's very special and really excited about it.
Yeah, it is. All right, so let's get into the team here a little bit. Maybe you've seen more than I've seen, but I literally don't think I've seen them run a play of their offense or what their defensive packages are going to look like. Maybe you have, but I haven't, and maybe that shouldn't be unusual, but it feels like it is, and it feels deliberate. So what do you make of how they're kind of slow rolling out what everybody sees from what the Commanders are going to be?
I think, during OTAs and minicamp, you saw shades of what they wanted to do. You saw shades of, the defense, the defensive structure, the basic coverages, the different personnel packages. They haven't really given you any indication on who's going to be filling those roles, which I think is probably smart. Offensively, I think you see kind of a pass emphasis, and that's what you're going to get this time of year, right? They're going to see all these different concepts, and there's nothing distinguishable about the concepts because everybody in the NFL runs similar concepts. It's just about when Cliff chooses to call them and when the execution's there. So I think it is pretty general. I think it is probably somewhat intentional. I think when you look at Adam Peters' background, kind of coming from New England, he's going to play things close to the vest. And and again, it's still so early in the process. They're still probably figuring out, I would assume, exactly who and what they want to be. So I think that's another element.
Okay, well then take me through that. Where are they in the process, and where do you think they're going, and how long does it take? How do you think through this year one with a very, very, very different team?
Well, I think back to when I was playing and kind of the structure. So you kind of leave training camp with a general idea, but you don't really know until you get probably through that first quarter of the season. And what I mean by that, it's like you're establishing, kind of what concepts are we good at, what runs are we good at, what protections are we good at, what do our guys do really well, what do our guys do poorly, especially on the defensive side of the football. So I think right now, you're seeing elements of that in kind of what they're doing with Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota. They're still trying to feel that out, right? The receiver packages, it's not like the starters and the backups. There's a different allocation of resources there. In the backfield, they've got different, in the defensive backfield, they've got different combinations of people working together because they're just trying to piece together what it means to be, what guys do well. And I think it's still very early in that process, but I would assume that because the coaches get to spend so much time with these guys that they have a better feel for it than we do, obviously.
Yeah. What do you think they're good at?
Right now?
Do you know?
No, I think that's part of the thing is I don't know. The one thing I do think they are good at, just watching, is I think that Jaden Daniels has a really good feel, much better feel than I anticipated of what defenses are presenting pre-snap and what they're gonna be in post-snap. And I think you see that in how quickly he's able to get the ball out of his hands, how he's able to sit on certain reads, especially in man coverage, understanding where his answers are in the concept. I've been really impressed with that. So in terms of what they've been good at in practice so far, that jumps out to me. And I think also another thing that we saw from obviously early in the offseason was I think the defensive back group, despite their kind of novelty together, seem to have a really good feel for how to disguise coverages, and that's something that I'm excited for. So hopefully they just continue to build on those things.
Okay, I haven't seen Jaden Daniels in a literal, what I would describe, full-speed football practice yet. You probably haven't either. And yet everyone is raving about what they've seen. So how do you kind of balance that when you think about, obviously there's a lot of high hopes. Obviously he's an elite athlete. I agree with you. What I see, and you can speak to it way more intelligently than I can, but I see a very mature decision-making process that seems to be happening, which excites me about him. But when anyone asks me, what does he look like? I don't know how to answer that question because I haven't seen him literally practice or get chased by Micah Parsons yet. So I don't even know how to answer that question.
I think you gotta, I'm going to steal a phrase, a Turner phrase from Craig Hoffman, my co-host on the Take Command podcast. And one of the things he always says is you got to ace the test you're given. And I think he's done a really good job, Jaden Daniels has, of acing the test that's being presented. So when I look at what they're doing, I look at his drops, I look at the timing, I look at the rhythm, I look at his footwork in the pocket. And so what I mean by that is he's never off rhythm, or he's very rarely off rhythm. For a young player, that's awesome because it means he's seeing it well. It means his brain, usually your brain matches your feet. And when you're watching him on the field, I feel like all of those indicators seem to be heading in the right direction. So is it perfect? Is he going to be an all-pro? Is he going to be the next Peyton Manning? I don't know. But in terms of the things he's had to do so far, he's done a good job of that. And so I hope he continues to do a good job. And as it ramps up, as we get into the first padded practice, as we get into the joint practices, as we get into the preseason, as we get into week 1, I hope he just continues to follow a nice linear progression matching the intensity of the schedule. And as of right now, he's doing a good job. But again, does that mean he's going to be perfect week 1? Probably not. We still have to do a lot of growing and a lot of learning.
What did you think of Cliff Kingsbury's offense in Arizona? And what elements of it do you think are coming here? And what do you think will be, I know it's an early stage, will be different with the Commanders offense?
You know, it's hard to evaluate an offense without kind of putting some of your own bias on it and what your exposure and what your experience has with NFL offenses. And so what I'd say about Cliff is that I thought actually he did a pretty good job of branching out from what people would consider his speciality, which is kind of just spread them out, air raid emphasis. Like, obviously that's a big part of what they do. But I think when you look at it, they were in 2 tight ends a ton. They ran the ball a ton. They did. I think the thing I came away pleasantly surprised with is I felt like Cliff understood at a high level of how to stress defenses. And that is the ultimate thing when you're looking at an offensive coordinator.
That's what Quinn said about him when he hired him.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what you see. And again, like, I didn't even know Dan said that, but when you watch him, I love what he's able to do. It's, hey, we're going to get, in a 3-by-1, we're going to jet motion the back. We're going to force a 4-by-1 overload. We're going to find the isolation on the backside with DeAndre Hopkins. Like, that's stealing. That's understanding how the defense is going to respond to certain looks and stressing them with formation by spreading guys out and stressing them by putting your best playmakers in positions where they can be successful. So that's what I saw, and I think you see shades of that already. Even though they're pretty generic and general so far in terms of practice, I think you see shades of that excellent playmaker, specifically in the last week of OTAs. We can't get too detailed on scheme here, but just the way he used the personnel, the motion, the shift pre-snap to stress the defense to find the quarterback an easy throw. That was a fantastic job.
Obviously, this is an incomplete roster. I think that goes without saying that that's the case. I think the coaching staff and Peters knows this, and there's only so much you can do in an offseason. But what was notable the other day when Quinn said there are position groups that we think on the outside are perceived as a weakness that we don't see it that way. And he wasn't specific, but I think we could all guess which ones it might be that he's talking about. So I think it's 2. I think they think their offensive line's better than people think it is. But that's why I want to ask you about that, because I'm not so sure that that's the case. I think in the middle of it is, but I still feel like they're going to have to show me at the 2 tackle positions. I don't know where you are on that.
Yeah, so, I have no insight on how they actually feel about this group, but just, from a 1,000-foot view, looking at the information that we have at our disposal, like, I don't think they've shown me enough yet, to say that they are good or bad, right? You think about, the OTAs, the mini camps, it's all basically on air for the most part for the offensive linemen. Like, they do individual, then they go lift. Like, that was their off-season schedule. In mini camp, there was a very little bit of 11-on-11 where you see real rushers, and I see some of the warts of some of the players we're talking about. Like, Cornelius Lucas is a tremendous pass protector that has a hard time with some of the run game stuff in terms of getting that 3 technique cut off on the backside of a run, which a tackle needs to do. Brandon Coleman, I think you see the athlete, but again, there's a technical kind of issue in terms of understanding your pass rush line, get speed inside quite a bit. Trent Scott, I think, great in terms of the run footwork, the athlete, but the pass protection's a little bit lacking. So, and that's a big part of this offensive line is that left tackle spot. Then you put them next to Allegretti, you put them next to Biotish. Those are 3 new pieces, whoever ends up playing left tackle. And it's been my experience that those guys need to come together. And that's what this time of year is for. So depending on how that group comes together, in 3, 4, 5 weeks, like, that's the thing that's going to be really informative on whether or not it's a strength or weakness. So again, they might like the guys, they might like the personalities, they might like the mindset, and that's all stuff that can show up in the meeting room. But in terms of execution, that's a huge element. And and you mentioned Wiley there. I feel like looking at how the offense was called last year, they put him in about as tough a spot as you could possibly be.
I'm on a board for a complete redo for him,
and
because I think he's a better pro than what people perceived him as, and that's why I am open-minded. I know a lot of the fans aren't, but I am open-minded to let's see this one again in this offense and see how he performs in it.
Yeah, I'm of the same mindset. I think Cliff, again, you asked me what I saw in Arizona. I think he understands that outside of quarterback, the most difficult thing to do on the field is to pass protect and play all line. And I think he did a good job of calling plays and calling a game to insulate that group. So with Wiley, I think you're going to see something very similar this year in terms of better production. They're not going to stress him the same way, because I think when you look at him and you watch him on a down-to-down basis, obviously he has the bad strikeouts, but on a down-to-down consistency level, I think he does a pretty gosh darn good job. Is he an all-pro? No. But is he a bad football player? No. He's somewhere in the middle there, which I think gets fans upset. But you have to have positions on the field that are just solid football players.
Yes.
And I think he fits that role.
Yeah. All right, the other position group, there's two others, and one that I think he was referencing might have been tight end, where there's a perception that it is a weakness on this team, and I don't know enough about Ben Sinnott to know what role he's going to play, how they're going to utilize him, because they've described him in many different ways with many different skill sets for them, and then how much juice is left in the tank for Zach Ertz at this point in his career. I'm with them on that. If that's what they were referring to, that group might be better than people think it is.
I mean, watching Zach Ertz in the minicamp OTA period, like, he still has that elite ability, that special ability to create separation on his routes, to understand what I call the dark arts. You know, like, I got to talk to him a little bit about, you know, how he's so good at understanding what stem to use. He's like, well, I know so much pre-snap defense that I can anticipate post-snap better than anybody in the NFL. And I think that's just exactly what he does. And he understands how to gain leverage on routes. He understands how to take friendly angles so he's always open. So I think he showed, to me, he checked a lot of boxes. Just basically said, like, I am the guy that I was before the injury. I'm still productive. You know, and again, barring injury, I think he can have a very productive year here. I think when you look at John Bates and what he does in terms of blocking I think he's a very special talent in the NFL now. So I think he's a high-caliber player. Ben Sinnott, I think that's the wild card, the joker card, in my opinion, with regards to that group, because, you know, what is he really, like, what does he do for you well? Is he that F move piece? Is he more of a fullback? Like, what is his skill set actually? But if he turns out to be something special, kind of like a Kyle Juszczyk light in this offense, where, again, just him on the field presents issues. Like, him and John Bates could be 11, could be 12 personnel, could be 21 personnel, because of his blocking ability and because of his ability to move around the front. If they use him like that, great. But if not, again, his role becomes a little bit questionable, because I don't think he's a better receiver than that Zach Ertz, and I don't think he's a better blocker than John Bates. So, again, I think that group's going to be fine. It just, you know, are they going to be a C+, or are they going to be an A+? Depends on ultimately how Cliff decides to use Ben Sinnott and whether Ben Sinnott's ready for that role.
The other position group that he may have been referencing, Dan Quinn, like, some people think it's a weakness, we think it might be a strength, is corner.
Yeah.
I think it's a Wild West competition. I don't know what to make of it. I am willing to buy into this staff's reputation has built turnover machines. And I don't know, I called Deron Bland's record-breaking pick 6 last year, and he was 5th-round pick. So they've done this too many times. So if that's what they're referring to, maybe it's just a leap of faith in what they've done in the past, or I don't know, maybe the talent is a little better than people think it is.
I definitely think the talent's better, and I think I look at the defensive backs last year, just the stress they were put under on a down-to-down basis and the lack of structure they were given. It was kind of maddening. Like, I felt bad for them at times. And I think when you watch Dallas last year, it's like the antithesis of that. It's the complete opposite. They give them great structure. They give them great rules. They give them great ability to be confident and make plays. They understand how to tie coverage to the rush, which is extremely important. So I definitely think this group is like one of the groups I'm like, I know there's a lot of questions that remain, but I'm not concerned about it at all. I think I trust Joe Witt Jr. I trust this defensive staff to find the right people, to give them the right rules, to give them the right structure for them to play the best football of their careers. And so I'm not worried about it. And I think if that's a group that Dan's referring to, I'm 100% on board. I think that group's going to be I personally think that group's going to be totally fine.
Okay. How about Emmanuel Forbes specifically, though? Where are you on him heading into his second season?
You know, it's still early, and obviously got a lot of practice to watch yet, and obviously joint practices, preseason, all those types of things. But I think in the preseason, or in the OTA's minicamp, I think you saw a guy who understood really, like, kind of like what he needed to do in terms of like what he needed to show. I saw a guy who was physical with the press. I thought you saw a guy who had ball skills. He was getting his hands on footballs, breaking up passes. Lots of good things from him that made me really excited to see what he's about. And I do think maybe not today, before camp's over, the staff will see and identify that and be like, this is the guy we want making plays for this defense. And again, a big thing for him and a big thing for St. Just is not the coverage stuff, because they're both excellent at that. It's the tackling, the physicality stuff, which that question won't be answered for another couple of days. So
okay. Last player I want to ask you about, Jamin Davis. Where are you on him heading into what is final year of his rookie contract? and clearly they're trying him with different position skill sets this summer.
Yeah, and I have no insight on this. I'm just basing this off my playing experience and just watching teams. Like, I'm not sure that he ends up making the final 53, to be quite honest. Like, I think when you look at what they've done at linebacker with McGee, Luvu, and Warner, and Pittman, I think Pittman had a great OTA minicamp period. Like, I think those are the four. And so you move him to edge rusher, and he is a guy that is a good blitzer, but edge rushing is a completely different thing, and we can talk about that for an hour if you want. But I don't see them keeping him over someone like Andre Jones or KJ Henry. I think those guys are more polished, they're more effective, they give you more flexibility in the front, and I don't know. I was talking to Fred Smoot about this today, and I said, if you can name me one guy that successfully switched positions and then made the team, like, let me know. And I said, I'll wait. And he couldn't think of anybody. And I think that just speaks to how difficult the position he's in. And again, like, people are like, oh, he can still play linebacker.
Well, there's plenty of examples of guys who were really good corners that became safeties later in their career.
I think that's a great example, but that's almost but again, for how many good guys there's a bunch of guys who didn't do it.
Some of them were Hall of Famers that did it. Rod Woodson, people like that.
Yeah, 100%. But it's a short, very special list of guys. Yeah. And I do think corner to safety is a little bit easier, than linebacker to edge rusher. And obviously guys like Micah Parsons do it, but he played linebacker and edge rusher for 2 years. So the fact that this switch has happened so suddenly, I've got my reservations and questions about his role and his impact on this team. If he does make the roster, great, good for him, but I don't see it being as impactful as I think a lot of people early on in the offseason thought it might be.
Okay. All right, last thing, just a big, broad question. So they're talking a lot about building an identity, building character, championship, characteristics of the team. I think they're being very careful and wisely about putting any kind of real expectations, because it is all new for everybody. What do you look for this summer that says to you these things are happening, that what they want this team to become, the identity of this team to become? What should we be looking for that will be a sign that it's actually happening?
Well, I think the first and maybe most important thing is just look at the types of guys they brought in. Look at the draft. It's a bunch of tough, physical, competitive guys who are all captains, good leadership qualities. Look at the free agents they brought in. Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner. Like, they're all that way. And so you're kind of in your first foundational year, like, you've replaced, 30% of the team with guys that are your guys.
Maybe more.
Yeah, that fit your vision.
There may be 30 plus new players on this team.
Yeah, but guys that kind of fit that. And so to me, again, it takes a long time to kind of flesh out and finalize a roster from that standpoint. But I do think that when you look at those guys specifically, you say that's the sign they're going in the right direction. They didn't deviate it. They could have numerous times deviated from their draft strategy and gone for maybe the most athletically gifted or the highest ceiling type guy, but they went for guys with high floors that are going to get better. And I think if you build a team that way, I think San Francisco and Detroit are the perfect examples of this. It took them 3 years to get there, 4 years to get there, but that is the model. And I just say, like, they have made good decision after good decision when it comes to staffing, good decision after good decision when it comes to personnel, and now it's just about kind of continuing to build off that. And again, like, a big point of success is going to be Jaden Daniels, and we've already talked about how effective he's been early on in this process.
Logan, thank you so much for all the time.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Back after this, Bram Wednesday Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. I mentioned this yesterday when I was doing the recap of episode 4 of Hard Knocks with the Giants, and kind of focused in on mainly what the Giants were doing and how their teenage son of the GM, Joe Shane, ought to work in our front office, because he was sitting there basically telling his dad, I love this line. He goes, you get this job once, you might as well win. And he pointed to go up and get Jaden Daniels, which obviously the Commanders weren't going to trade with them if they were going to trade with anybody. But still, Adam Peters, keep your eye out on Joe Shane's kid. Obviously, he's on to something here. The other things that have been occurring, obviously, around the Giants, and a lot of the focus was what were they going to do about Saquon Barkley? And ultimately, in the end, they drew a line in the sand, and they just decided he wasn't worth what his market value was. And this went on for a couple of years. And for Barkley, who always wanted to be a Giant from New Jersey, goes, can't state it more often where he wants to be, what he wants to do. The fact that they didn't draw a line in the sand with others, but did with him, and in my humble opinion, is a top 3 running back in the NFL and still can do it at this level. I don't know what they were thinking in drawing the line the way they did. And it sounds like now that he's finally speaking and talking, it sounds like he doesn't quite really understand what happened here either, other than to say that Joe Schoen and the Giants just kind of came to a conclusion that he just wasn't worth the money. And maybe not him specifically, but that running backs aren't worth the money. He's taken this position that nobody is worth that, and running backs are replaceable. So recently he sat down and he spoke with Diana Rossini of The Athletic and spoke about what was up with the Giants.
He made a comment, said that it took 10 years off his life. Like, if it took 10 years off your life, what do you think it did for me? Yeah. But like, they made offers to me, but it was like, my offer, I never really got a true negotiation because like Daniel got the deal done before the tag deadline. Literally, he got it done. It
was almost on the minute.
Yeah, and then I got tagged right after. Dex and Andrew got their stuff done, but like it was different. Like they didn't have like to worry about like they can go in there and negotiate. So like for us, like I never feel like we really got a fair negotiation once I got tagged. Like they sent me something before the tag deadline, and didn't agree with it. Felt like the guaranteed money wasn't there. All I asked was like, I'm fine with this contract. Can we just guarantee the first 2 years? They tagged me, and I was like, I already know how this is going to go. They said, listen, sit down. Joe was like, I'll talk to the ownership, this and that third, we'll get back to you. And then crickets. It was like, all right. And then after that, like, it kind of was like, I didn't like because I get the business, but it's like they have the tag, right? So when they tag me now, they have all the leverage. And it's just like, all right, I get you have all the leverage and you should do this, like you're doing your job. But at the end of the day, like, can I get some respect too? Like, just, can we get this thing going? Like, can we find a way, like the same way how you found a way to get DJ done, how you get Dex done and Andrew done? Could we find a way to get me done? But that's in the past. I don't really care about that because ultimately, like, I got tagged, played for the 10 mil, and then I end up getting more money. Like, I end up, like, that's why you like, at the time, it seemed like it was a disaster, and I'm like, oh man, like I gotta do this, but in reality, like I bet on myself, and I came out on top in that scenario.
And the worst part about the whole thing is that he ends up on what is a more ready-made team to win. No offense to the Giants, but I mean, I'm not like taking a hot take saying the Eagles have a better roster than the Giants do right now, and he ends up going there, and he ends up basically staying close to home, and he ends up putting on a rival's jersey. Like, we had this happen with Brian Mitchell, years and years and years ago, where, the ownership just didn't value him to the degree that they probably should have at the time. And he ended up playing for 2 of the rivals. And it's just crazy to think about him wearing that jersey. I don't know how Giants fans are not just fuming at Joe Schoen. And especially after seeing what happened on Hard Knocks, where he just openly explained that the reason why Saquon Barkley is not there is because they just decided that it was too much to pay. Meantime, the Eagles, with a better roster, better quarterback, better offensive line, better weapons, decided he was worth that amount of money. I mean, I go back to this all the time, and I talk about this all the time. I believe that you pay star players, regardless of position. You pay them market value, especially if there's someone that is loyal to you, especially if there's someone that can be a difference maker. If Barkley looked like he was on some kind of massive decline, and I know he had some injuries and some serious ones in the past, but last year, for the majority of the season, he was the difference-making player for them. The year they went to the playoffs, he was in an MVP discussion the way that he was playing for them. And earlier in Hard Knocks, when they showed some of the, group meetings that they were having, there were a couple of clips where they showed members of the front office asking Joe Schoen directly, what is our identity if Saquon Barkley is not part of the team? I just don't buy that this is good business, just in general. And John Mara, who I think through all of this, like, has showcased he's willing to let his decision makers make the decisions. At least what's being portrayed on HBO is he walks in the room and he asks them what's going on, and whatever they decide to do, he will put in his 2 cents, but they let them do it and they kind of calmly move on. Is that the reality of it? I don't know. But like on TV, it certainly looks that way, that they're letting their decision makers make this decision. And it's like watching a car wreck though. when you have somebody of that guy's level, and we're talking about adding, a second or third year and bumping his pay a little bit higher to be a little more commensurate to where Christian McCaffrey is and less where an average running back is, I don't know what the harm is. And then I look at the Giants and I go, okay, they let Xavier McKinney walk. They paid Daniel Jones. Yes, they paid Andrew Thomas. Most of the other players on this team, yes, they paid Brian Burns, but that's after the fact. It's not like they have a ton of humongous salaries on their team. So I don't get why you would do this. I think it's bad business for a locker room to just pull out, heart and soul player, team who bleeds your organization, incredible representative. And oh, by the way, is one of the 2 or 3 best at his position, and he hasn't turned 30 yet. Like, I don't quite understand the thinking behind something like that. And therefore why I've been so critical of the Giants and Hard Knocks. I appreciate they're giving us all the access, but I'm like watching this and I'm going, like, what in the world are they thinking? And what exactly is their plan? And if they don't value him, who do they value? All right, that'll do it for today. More from camp tomorrow. Bram watch the show, ESPN 630 Sports Capital.